Roger Gonzalez here with LocalTheatreNY.tv. Hey, whenever I find someone who is interesting and has an interesting story to tell, like this fella Autry right here, who wrote a Southern Fairytale. It's a solo show. It's opening up at Frigid on February 19th. I have to interview them and share that story or their story with you. So, Ty, let's begin with what is your play about? And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so a Southern Fairytale is the story of a gay Christian growing up in the Deep South. That's kind of like the tagline I've created for it. It is a autobiographical play mixed in with some fiction. So it's based on a real story, my own personal story of growing up in the Deep South region of Georgia. You know, we had like cotton snow, that kind of stuff growing up. County of 5,000 people. I mean, I come from a very small town, and it goes through this character's journey, a character I've named Alex, as he explores his queer identity and also his relationship to God and his family, even.
That's a very interesting mix of things, and also within that there's these perceptions that I'm sure exist on many levels. Like, for instance, the perception about religion and its acceptance of, gay, I guess, members of the church or members of the community. And then there's the other aspect, which is this impression that coming out these days is so easy. But tell us what really it's like.
So, I mean, I'm going to speak from the perspective of coming out about 10 years ago. That's when my journey first started, and I actually came out of the closet 3 different times.
Okay.
And that was because I was sent to therapy my first time coming out, and that therapy was meant to help me with my anger issues. They wondered why I had anger issues. But it also delved with some conversion therapy and changing my behavior on how I interacted with men and women. So,
tell us about the conversion therapy for a minute. Explain to some people who may not know what that is.
Yeah.
And how it affected you.
So conversion therapy broadly is anything that deals with changing someone's behavior, abstinence, lusting of what they consider homosexual temptations. It was all in that kind of world. I will say that I'm very blessed that I didn't go like full throttle.
Wow.
My therapist did want me, it was mainly around anger management and daddy issues. But there was a through line of behavioral changes that doesn't fit into cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which is a useful form of therapy. Like, I remember one time we were sitting down, and he would actually make sure that I had more guy friends than girlfriends. Like, I'm crossing my legs right now, and he would actually correct me to not cross my legs because it's too feminine.
Now wait, that's the therapist?
My therapist, who was also a head pastor at the church I was attending at the time.
Oh wow, those are 2 different layers of things happening at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you deal with that?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I learned what they wanted to hear, and they being everyone in my life that was rooting for me to be straight and to not live a life of sin, which was a lie. I became very good at lying. I became very good at hiding.
Pretended.
Yeah, I became very good at compartmentalizing my life into this side of me that I didn't tell anyone, and then this side of me that everyone knew, which was the hetero guy, 4.0 church leader dude that was just rocking it in every aspect. I was a golden child. I'm the oldest of 5 boys, and so I was homeschooled for many years, so I'm a bit of a nerd, and
that's
that
a
kept
lot of
through.
pressure, though, being the oldest too, because then the expectation, I guess, is that
Set the example.
You set the example. Now, dealing with that, you said you compartmentalized. So I'm imagining, did you behave like a certain way with this group and another way with that group and just shifted your personality? Is that what you were doing?
I did, all the time.
Wow.
It was this dual idea that around my family, around my church, around the school I was attending at the time. And I mean, this is very broad strokes. I went to 5 different high schools in 4 years and 2 colleges because I dual enrolled. So like,
why did you do that again?
Well, because I kept getting kicked out or banned or pulled from or moved or excommunicated or, kicked out of the house. I mean, there's a lot of different layers, and obviously, like, the show A Southern Fairytale ties this all in together with a bit more fiction to make it a little more juicy for the audience. And funny, too, because I want, like, already talking about it with you, it sounds so dark and heavy. But obviously, I want to state this, like, I have this joy and love for my faith and relationship with God, and it was partly my upbringing that was so hard, but it also gave me the tools to look at it and understand what I had to do. And that goes back to compartmentalizing, which was protect them in this moment until I got out of the house and then could start being my true self. And I'm very lucky that when I turned 17, my senior year was my third time being caught for being gay, and I stayed out. Senior year was a blast, college was a blast, and it's been a continual journey of like learning my place in the queer community, and also this idea of talking about faith and helping those that want to come back to faith, or maybe are angry at faith, or even just have questions about it. And that's kind of where I'm trying to bridge that gap and help even talk more about interfaith among the queer community.
Right. You know, faith comes in, I want to spend a minute on faith because I think there's a difference between faith and religion.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, we'll talk about the humor part, because humor is a phenomenal way to heal and to deal with very stressful situations. So tell us about the faith. You had faith, you just weren't connecting with, I guess, the rules of the church?
Yeah, that particular church. I mean, if you know church history, you know that we started off as like kind of one linear faith, right? And that broke off into two, and then it like all of a sudden spread into like the dozens of variations. So I was a very strict form of Protestant. That's what we Presbyterian. And I didn't fit in with that faith, and my doctrine didn't align with their doctrine. And over the years, my doctrine still has shifted to include all these new ideas and nuances of what I consider my personal Christian faith, without hating or lamenting over others' versions of their faith.
Sure.
I mean, I would say my mom, my dad, and all my brothers, we all have different variations of faith, but it's still the same thing. But it's also looking at like Buddhist and Muslim and Jewish.
Well,
and
people adjust, right?
Yeah, and those also have a right, because that's also a faith, like you said. It's a belief in something, or a belief in the absence of something.
Now, let's touch upon the play, because obviously that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So all this happened.
Yes.
And you decided, I guess, to write a play about it.
Yes.
How did that all start? Tell us the evolution of that. Had you written plays before? All that kind of.
No. So this is
this is your first time.
This is my first play
Tell us
I've
about
ever written. My mentor, Alex Bond, which she was in New York and then moved down to Georgia, where I met her, was a mentor of mine, and she challenged me to write this play, and then suddenly passed away.
Oh,
And
sorry.
so this is, thank you. So this is a memory of her. My director is also one of her close friends. She got us connected when I moved up here, so it's a very much in the family of her and in memory of her storytelling. And I actually had the first reading, which was just 7 pages, 2 years ago in my living room with 20 people that came over.
7 pages.
7 pages, that's it. I wrote 7 pages.
Who was in the room?
My potential director, who is now my director, David Carson, who's amazing. Friends, some industry people, just people I trusted, with letting them in on my personal story for the first time, and hearing, like, they all knew, like, bits and pieces of what I went through, but none of them actually knew the full extent of what I experienced in high school that made me the person I am today. From that moment, they decided, my director's like, you need to write. Wrote it. We had a workshop of it at New York Summerfest that same year in September. And then last year, I did 2 sold-out performances in Atlanta, a hometown performance at Outfront Theater Company. I performed at Dublin, the International Dublin Gay Theater Festival, and then I also performed at World Pride at the Duplex on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall.
So how many performances have you done? I mean, how many
Iterations?
festivals? So
the show, this actually, we're on version 3.3 of the script, if that tells you anything. Version 1 kind of being the workshop, which is a completely different version, and we just scrapped the structure of it and restructured it because it just didn't make sense. It was really dark, and
You said that before we started shooting. You were telling me it was dark. At what point and how was the decision made that humor needed to be a part of this, which I totally agree is important?
Because the story itself is so dark.
Yeah.
Like, the words themselves...
Right.
The words themselves are, no matter how you look at it. It's
Gotcha.
a dark story. I didn't need to add a layer of it making it dark. I actually wanted to bring in, like, a 28-year-old perspective, retelling the story, but also finding, like, the gay humor in it, you know, and laughing at his past, because there's some really funny things. Like, for example, Exodus, a conversion therapy camp, which I'm blessed to have never gone to, but I have friends that went. Exodus doesn't make sense because why would you send a bunch of gay boys to a camp over the summer where they all bunk together in the same cabin?
Talk about temptation, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they want to lessen their temptations or abstinence, and you literally stick 10 boys in the same room.
That's hysterical.
And you're like, this doesn't make sense.
That's funny. That's actually, yeah, I see your point. That's a very funny thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like when kids misbehave in school and they get suspended so they don't go to class. Well, that's what they don't want to do.
They don't want to do. They don't go to class. You need to send them to class. Like, that
yeah,
doesn't make
you
any
need
sense.
to force them to do more work. Now, so this is version, what was it again?
3.3.
3.3. How long is the play? And tell us how you've evolved the play, because you mentioned that it's a fictional representation
Yes.
of what happened to you.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So the play is an hour long. I've structured it in a way that's like a fairy tale. I mean, it's a Southern fairy tale. And so the story is actually broken up into these chapters, an introduction, a conclusion, and the middle 4 chapters are 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So you see this progression of the character Alex Belmont going through discovery of queer identity plus his changing relationship with faith and questioning his faith. And by the end of it, there's like this hook that I won't give away because it's a bit of something that's very close to my heart and kind of a very touching personal thing to me.
You got to go see the play to see
I don't give that away because it's a universal thing I think that queer people struggle with, but also marginalized people struggle with. Like, surprisingly, a lot of women resonate with this show.
Is that right?
Because I was in a position where men, older men, especially white men, were telling me how to live my life. I couldn't do this. I had to just follow these rules.
Sure.
And women fall under that same category of
Yes.
a lot of straight white men telling them how to live their life. So
Interesting.
even though my story is very gay, you
Right.
know, they see how being marginalized is kind of a universal theme, and we can all rally behind the idea that we don't deserve to be marginalized.
Right. I mean, you know, no matter who you are, you deal with external
Yes.
forces and external influences. Now, in the play itself, or with the play itself, you have taken it to different parts of the country,
Yes.
the world.
Just to Dublin and Georgia and New York, but after this Frigid performance, we're actually taking it on the first international tour. I'm
love
self-producing a tour. It's my first time at it. I mean, my first play, and I decided to just go full throttle.
Wow, well, that's great. That's actually, you know, a testament to the fact that if you really want to do something, you can do it.
Yes.
Tell us about the reactions you've gotten. Now, you said, how was the reaction that first day in your living room or in your house with the 7 close friends? Or it was 7 pages,
20,
20 close friends. And how was it when you first performed it in front of an audience and since then? Tell us about what kind of feedback did you get? How did you evolve the play based on that feedback? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think the first and second times, the reading and the workshop were kind of the similar through line of just like a heartbreaking story and a lot of like, I shed a lot of tears. And I was like, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted like you to laugh too and see the joy that I find in looking back on the past, because I firmly believe that Alex looks at his past and he loves it because it's created the person he is today. And he wouldn't change that. So because of that feedback after the first 2 performances, we rewrote the script into something that talks more about the joy you find in your past. Even no matter how painful it is, you can still find this resonance of lessons in loving because it's created the person you are today. Where we plan to take this further, I think, with the tour is to continue developing this theme of the fairy tale aspect of it. I think is the next layer we're looking at of tying
Explain
in.
that to us. What is the fairy tale aspect?
Yeah, so it kind of comes from this whole harkening back to, I'm a big book nerd. I probably have read almost every fairy tale under the sun. And so I tie in themes from fairy tales, or I correlate certain fairy tales to my own personal story.
Right.
And it's also broken up as like this adventure, like Alex goes on this adventure to find himself and in the end finds the love of his life, his Prince Charming, you know?
That's great. Okay.
Every man's dream is to find their Prince Charming, and eventually Alex finds his Prince Charming.
Gotcha. So now, let's go back to that reaction that
Yes.
you got.
Yeah.
Okay, so 20 people in your house, this is the first time you sort of open up about your life story.
Yeah.
What was the reaction, and subsequently, what were some of the other reactions you got from other audiences?
I think the reaction I got here was shock.
Like really shocked.
Shocked,
Okay.
because you think back on 10 years ago, and I think most people, especially here in the North, know, I'm going to use air quotes, of the hardship of what it was like coming out. They really didn't know what it was like. You know, you hear stories, but you never really, at least, got to see it in action or really see the trauma that would cause in somebody. So that was one of the main reactions. But since then, shifting the story, right?
Right.
We've had two main reactions come from people. One I've already hit on was that marginalized idea, you know, people talking about how they just feel like a deep sense of relief and forgiveness all of a sudden.
Really?
Because they're able just to let go of the pain because they realize that it doesn't serve them anymore. But another thing is that we found is that people have actually come up to me and my producing partners and the creative team and told us that they've either decided to rekindle their faith and to explore it after leaving the church, because through the show they understand that questioning the doctrine isn't a sign of not having a faith, it's a sign of having a deeper faith and a deeper understanding of what's possible.
I got you.
So those are kind of two main reactions we get from people once the show is over.
Do people, so you took it to Dublin,
yeah.
but it was an LGBT festival?
It was. So it's a 2-week festival. It happens every year. I highly recommend people going to it. It was the best time. Met some of the most amazing people. From that festival, I'm actually doing an Australian tour in 2021. So I'm going to Australia for 2 months to perform.
That's
based
amazing.
on the connections I made there. But that festival was unique because a European audience we found is very different than an American audience. They kind of, well, one, I talk about high school and they don't have a high school system like we do. So part of the storytelling aspect was different because 9th grade doesn't correlate to like 9th grade over there.
Right.
Also, Dublin in particular is a very Catholic country, and this talks more about Protestant and kind of evangelical beliefs.
Sure.
So they came at it from this perspective of their very rich history with the Catholic faith. I mean, the Huguenot Wars, I mean, they have wars revolving around doctrine.
Right.
You know, America has never had wars in the country, you know, revolving around faith.
Right.
We had a civil war, but that wasn't a religious war.
Now, just to touch upon Ireland, because they are, you know, they have accepted equal marriage or marriage equality.
They have a gay prime minister too.
Right, and so I mean, even though it's a Catholic country, and you know, and has a huge Protestant population, did that change?
They love the show.
They must have loved it, right?
They love the show
because they're very forward-thinking.
They are, but they also have a large,
very conservative
population, traditional values, like
Sure.
that. Well, I'm gonna use traditional values, right? It's funny. It correlates very heavily to Southern culture as well. And so they actually saw bits and pieces of what we consider Deep South here in the United States actually correlates with their like country aspect.
Sure, makes sense, right?
But overall, the reception was super positive there. They actually wanted me to come back and perform it, but I'm already going to Prague and Belgrade.
Yeah, you want to take it.
I want to take it other places, and also they saw this version, a very similar version to it. So if I rewrite, maybe like 5.0 and like have an hour and a half long version, I'll take it back over there. But I have to say, like the audiences there are so loving and so attentive. They pay attention, they respond, and they love to see work like this that kind of breaks open the box and showcasing different values and ideas.
Let me ask you about your faith.
Yeah.
All right, because that's shifted obviously from that very strict, compartmentalized way that you started off. But the real you and the real faith that you have, give us a few seconds of perspective on that.
The real faith and real version of me in relationship to God is that is just that. It's a relationship that I have with God. There's no like having to go to a pastor who then talks to God for me. It's my own personal relationship. Sure. It's a communication. I also have different viewpoints that are kind of radical, I think, to some Christians, even still today, like the concept that, there is no hell, really, because looking at the Bible and doing my own research and talking to other theologians, how can a God that asks me to forgive 77 times 7, which is back then in the Old Testament is a correlation to infinity, how can someone of a higher deity ask that of me, but then if I sin, throw me into a burning pit of fire,
Exactly.
and then never forgive me.
Well,
And so that's like, so it's like nuances like that, and I take after, if you know theology, I take after Reformed Protestant doctrine as like my foundation, but I've intermixed these different ideas that I've just gained over the years of questioning my faith.
you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I always believe personally that this whole hell concept is just another way to control people to do what the church or the religion wants you to do as a form of threat. You know, It's
Right.
you don't do it this way, this is what's going to happen. And you know, just look at art throughout history. There's dozens and thousands of depictions of hell used as that sort of tool. What would you like to do with your play? I mean, we know you're going to tour.
Yeah.
What's your big picture for your play?
Big picture,
Mhm.
I would love to take it to an off-Broadway house.
Okay.
I would love to write a version that adds another 30 minutes to it, make an hour and a half piece.
Sure.
That talks a little bit more about like the post-high school years, because right now it's focused really on like the high school, the transformation of it, but I don't really get into, once that happened, how Alex had to find himself again in the queer community because he didn't have any queer mentors. You know, he's this floundering twink of a gay guy, you know?
Just kind of figuring
Just
out.
kind of figuring it out as
Yeah,
he goes
sure.
along.
That makes
and I
sense.
think that's important to like look at it, and then like the progression of like his new faith in that moment. And also because like I had this idea of like projections being used. It's like does pop up these fairy tale characters, because I play multiple characters in my show.
Right.
And I would love for it like all of a sudden like pop up next to me using projection and mirrors and glass is like the dad character all of a sudden pops up, or the therapist, and actually it's a cartoon version of it, so it really feels like you are inside of this like pop-up fairy tale book.
That sounds really cool, actually. So it would be sort of a digitized, visual, multi-visual type of presentation.
Because
I love it.
my background is actually, I got a degree from Georgia Tech in electrical engineering, so like that technology is a very big passion of mine as well, and I want to bring that into this show and find the right people that can do it, because I don't have the skill sets, but I know it's possible, and I just want to bring the team together that can make this happen.
So off-Broadway producers, people out there, you know, reach out to Ty. I mean, that's a great idea, I think. What message would you like to give to younger people in your position when you started sort of grappling with these choices and these decisions and these questions?
It's okay to question. I think the biggest thing that was kind of, by some leaders, my family was always like, it's okay to question, but I think the leaders in the church kind of subdue that. Don't be afraid of asking hard questions. Asking hard questions is actually a growth on your part into a next stage of faith. And allowing yourself to question your identity and your faith and your relationship to it is a huge turning point of growth, and it's hard, but once you get past that point, it's so much smoother, and it sounds a little like we've said this before, but it does get better. Like, but you have to keep looking at challenges and pushing through them, and not let it push you to the ground.
What about coming out?
Yeah.
What about coming out? Because, you know, I guess people have this perception, which is what we started with, that, you know, nowadays coming out is such an easy thing for people because we're more accepting in general than, let's say, 20, 30 years ago. Is that true? Are you getting any kind of feedback on that? Tell us.
Yes and no.
Okay.
It is easier to come out because we have technology at our fingertips that allows someone to open their phone and just look up queer icons, queer history, theology, all of that. So we live in a day and age where once you decide to start learning, you can. That wasn't something I had 10 years ago. But it doesn't mean that family responses, religious responses, our administration responses to it are not going to be detrimental to your mental health. And I think we're looking, and even your physical health. I mean, so it's a double-edged sword. It is easier to come out right now, but it also could be one of the most dangerous things to do in America in certain areas.
Yeah.
It just depends on where you are. Like, if you come out in Atlanta, you're probably fine. If you come out where I'm from in Georgia, you may be okay if the family's okay with it, but you also might be kicked out. Still, to this day, in 2020.
Still happens. So tell us about now, your family, your relationship. You found your Prince Charming.
I did.
And you're doing Frigid, which is great. Tell us, let's wrap it up with those wonderful things happening.
Yeah, so I have a very loving relationship with my mom and my brothers. They've all seen the show. They all have different opinions of the show.
Sure.
That's a whole other interview topic on a different day. I'm also engaged to one of the best people I know in the world.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've been together now for 2.5 years, coming up on 3 years. He's been instrumental in this show, just kind of pushing me when things were hard.
So I assume he was there at the beginning.
No.
No.
Oh, no, yes, beginning, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning of, like, when I came out.
No, the play, yeah.
He was there in the living room, he saw it.
That's great.
He was behind the phone recording it, so I could read it, look at it later. And he's actually come with me to every single touring spot that I've gone to.
That's fabulous, what a great
and working
thing to
with his
share.
job, he's an executive for a cannabis firm, so he's crazy busy on a whole other level.
That's a big industry now.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm extremely blessed, and I even talk about this in my show, but like after everything is said and done, I'm successful, I'm loved, I'm cared for, I can care for others, I can pour into others.
I love it.
I'm teaching new students as well how to be actors, and it's this whole sense of like
So
everything that happened was worth it.
It came together, it worked out. Now, folks, Frigid, February 19th, tell us how many performances and how can we get tickets to your show so you can go see it.
So I have 5 performances happening from February 19th through March 6th. You can go to bit.ly/a Southern Fairytale, and that will just take you straight to the link. Or you can also just visit my website at Autry.com, and there'll be a button there that says purchase tickets.
And of course, we'll put that on this this wonderful video, so you can find it right there. You don't have to go, typing away. Ty, first of all, I want to congratulate you for such a phenomenal discovery in your own life. For such an amazing growth, and for putting it on stage and sharing it with audiences everywhere. I look forward to seeing the show on February 19th.
Yes,
and
I'm
I
excited to
hope
have
you
you
folks
there.
will see that. And also at the same time, please, folks, stay in touch with Ty. If you have any kind of stories that are similar, or if you have any kind of feelings that are similar, reach out to him. I think you'd be more than happy to have a conversation.
I would love that, because they also host interfaith queer panels, so it's queer individuals of different faiths coming together and talking about the similarities across faiths.
That's wonderful.
And like we're talking like from Muslim to Christianity to agnostic,
there you
atheist.
go, folks.
So let me know. I love these stories. I collect them. I read every email that comes my way.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Folks, LocalTheatreNY.tv, please share this video, share it with the right groups, share it with the right people. This is a very personal and interesting and important story to share. So I thank Ty, and I thank you folks for watching.
Thank you all.